goodbye, as it would stand 2-0. That game finished to Al Hilal as we round out Group H. Real Madrid progressing as group leaders. Al Hilal as runners-up. It is Salzburg and Pachuca packing their bags and going home. But the feeling in the Real Madrid camp is that things are going well. There's a good feeling in the camp. Here's Xabi Alonso and Trent Alexander-Arnold speaking after the game.
Today was our best game as a team. I felt that for me personally as well. Today was the best game I've had. It seemed to click out there. We had a game plan. We executed it really well, and we were very happy with the win today.
Evidentemente, me quedo más contento con el partido de hoy que con la primera parte contra Al Hilal, ¿no? También hoy el campo era mejor, la temperatura era mejor, ahora volvemos a Miami, pero sí que poco a poco algunas cosas hemos ido mejorando, pero todavía estamos fase startup, pronto todavía, para ir diciendo, vamos, cautela, contentos por hoy, algunas cosas buenas, pero queda todavía.
We now welcome in Frank Leboeuf and Alex Kirkland. Alex Kirkland was at the game. We'll be hearing from Frank just a little bit later on. Alex, let me talk to you about Real Madrid. Seem to be growing into the competition and growing under Xabi Alonso at this stage.
Yeah, we heard it from Trent there. This was by far the most complete Real Madrid performance so far under Xabi Alonso. It really feels like now they're making progress. They're heading in the right direction. I think there's a clearer and clearer sense of identity about what this Xabi Alonso team is going to be all about. I think it's really interesting that the first chance he got pretty much to switch to three at the back, which was his preferred system, mostly at Bayer Leverkusen, Xabi Alonso. He's gone for it. He talked about the fact that Rodrygo is now available. Is key to that. Rodrygo, a defender who used to playing as one of three centre-backs. He's done it at Chelsea. So switch to three at the back. It worked. I think it suits the full-backs or the wing-backs now as well in Trent and Fran Garcia. It suits the midfield. Every single player you go through the team, they seem to be playing in the right position, the position where they're most effective. Arda sitting in front of the back four in a double pivot with Fede Valverde. That worked. That gave the team some of the midfield creativity that they've been missing. Interesting role for Jude Bellingham, kind of on the right, almost of a front three, although a little bit more withdrawn than the front two, but it gave him the freedom, the space between the lines that he needs to be at his best. So like I say, I think go right through the team. I just felt like everyone was playing in the position where they could be most effective, and the way that they played with the ball, the way they worked off the ball in terms of their pressing. I think Xabi Alonso was very, very happy with how this went.
That back three is what we always saw under Xabi Alonso by Leverkusen. Are we going to be seeing more of it with Real Madrid?
He introduced it in the last few minutes against Pachuca. It was sort of kind of a throwaway in terms of the analysis of that match. And we were talking about all sorts of different things, but I thought that it was important enough for him to say, there are some things that we're going to change, and these are part of the changes that we're going to implement. And what does he get out of this back three? Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example. You have the back three that can, whenever Trent Alexander-Arnold pushes up, can be responsible to get out into wider areas. A guy like Antonio Rudiger may get into wider areas. Huijsen may get out into wider areas and be able to defend over distance. So you have that cover behind you if you're Trent Alexander-Arnold, and you have the extra center back in Tchouaméni that will cover whatever center back gets out wide. It frees up Trent Alexander-Arnold to then be a guy that can push up into the midfield line and be a passer of the ball, a deliverer of passes in terms of depth, vertical passing, keeping possession, finding an outlet, and who's that natural outlet? If you think about what happens into the next phase, into the next part of the field, well, it would be Jude Bellingham, and it's what we saw yesterday. It's Alexander-Arnold being an outlet in terms of him being the one that finds the initial pass, Bellingham being the one that receives it, and he's now on the turn, and whether he's passing the ball forward or driving with the ball, he's then joining in the attack. And all of that works if you get movement ahead of that midfield line. And that movement needs to happen from the two strikers, and that's Vini Jr. and Gonzalo Garcia. That partnership has worked really well. So then the question becomes, and it's an obvious question to ask, is it going to work as well with Kylian Mbappe? Kylian Mbappe is one of the best players in the world. But in order for this partnership to work with Vini Jr., they have to work together. Not apart from each other, but together in a more central position. Right now, if you are Xabi Alonso, you're thinking, this is exactly the way that I want my team to play. This is how I want us to evolve. This is how we want to attack. This is how we want to defend. And speaking of defending on that back three, all I would say is, Tchouaméni, from being a player that was on the fringes last season and booed at times at Santiago Bernabeu, now becomes a critical part of the success of Real Madrid this season. Because the role that he has in the middle of that back three, he's going to have to make decisions defensively. Do I cover the back of my defender? Do I step into the midfield? Can I drive with the ball forward? Can I find passes? A lot of thought process, a lot of processing information on the go with Tchouaméni in a position that he's not all that familiar with. But it seems like Xabi Alonso is saying, this is the guy to do this role.
Yeah, and as Ale mentioned in the highlight, Vini Jr. with a bit of an adjustment to his position. However, it's not one that he's unfamiliar with. Here he is speaking about it after the match.
Estamos cogiendo confianza y intentando entender lo más rápido posible lo que el mister quiere, ¿no? Porque tengo que jugar un poco hacia adentro. Siempre me ha gustado jugar hacia adentro porque estoy más cerca de gol, puedo dar más asistencia, marcar más goles y el equipo está jugando más compacto y eso todo acaba nos ayudando a presionar mejor o atacar mejor y tener más el balón. Y sobre esta posición, yo ya he jugado con Ancelotti en esta posición cuando hemos ganado la última Champions, pero volver a jugar en esta posición me cuesta un poco más, entonces tengo que me adaptar otra vez, entender cómo es jugar por ahí y entender lo más rápido posible que el mister quiere.
Tendría presión cuando tendría de 18 años, no había hecho ningún gol. Imagínate ahora que ya he marcado muchos goles, soy brasileño con más goles en este club y tengo ya muchos títulos y quiero seguir así, quiero ojalá poder jugar toda mi vida aquí.
When you listen to Vini Jr. speaking there and talking about an adjustment in a role that he's enjoyed playing under Carlo Ancelotti, Ale, he's saying it just takes some time to get back to doing that. Is this going to be the best role for Vini Jr. for the success of Real Madrid?
Well, it gives Vini Jr. variety. It doesn't mean that he can't go into a wider position. It doesn't mean that he cannot take players on in a wider area if he finds himself from an in-to-out run. He can still do that. But when he starts working the inside positions, now, if you're a right back, you have to figure out, okay, he's on my inside shoulder. Is he my responsibility or is he the responsibility of the center back from the opposing team who's on the outside shoulder? So now Vini is working those spaces, those in-between spaces, in between the inside shoulder of the right back, outside shoulder of the right center back. When he starts splitting defenders, then as a defender, you cannot actually address him and say, that's mine, he's mine. No, it's not a 1v1 situation anymore. Now as a defender, you have that doubt. Do I step? Does he step? Are we stepping together? What are we doing with him? It gives him variety, and you cannot actually address his position because he's moving in between defenders, in between lines. And the passing gaps and the passing lanes open up. And when they open up, that's when you find the pass from Jude Bellingham last night. And then you see the run inside shoulder of Vini Jr., inside shoulder of the defender, getting in behind the other defender. But in order for him to get in behind the other defender, guess what needs to happen? The other forward needs to move, needs to make a run. And that's what's happening naturally with Gonzalo Garcia, and that's why I say it's important that if Vini Jr. is going to be at his best in this position, that the relationship with Kylian Mbappe works naturally. One shows, the other one goes. One peels out, the other one shows underneath. These things need to happen naturally, and if they do, they become very dangerous. What I don't want from Vini is to be standing on the left-hand side. He limits his game over there because he adds an additional defender with the sidelines. And it's easy to address. That's Vini right there. I'm going to pick him up over there. When he starts moving, he becomes far more difficult to defend against.
And what we heard from him there, Alex, is that he definitely seems to be on the same page as his coach and listening to what his coach wants from him, because there have been those questions as to whether Vini Jr. and Kylian Mbappe are going to be doing what's asked of them from Xabi Alonso.
Yeah, Vinny had looked a little bit subdued in the first two games. This competition wasn't at his best, but there's no doubt he was at his best against Salzburg. And as he said in that clip there, he's always said that he likes playing in these positions that get him close to the goal because it feels like he can be more decisive. It's something that Carlo Ancelotti always used to talk about. The fact that most goals are scored with fewer touches, with one or two touches. You don't tend to score goals if you're starting from out on the wing and dribbling. So I think he likes it. It's the sort of position that he played when he made himself a Ballon d'Or contender, really, in terms of being decisive and scoring lots of goals. So, yeah, I think it can work with him and Mbappe. I mean, Xabi Alonso has been very, very crystal clear about this. He has said nowadays you cannot, as a team, be successful in football if all 11 players aren't working, aren't doing the same things, aren't working as a unit. It's impossible. It's impossible to have an elite team that's successful if you haven't got all 11 players on the same page. I think Vini in the past has shown that desire and that willingness to kind of work for the benefit of the team. Mbappe, it's more of an open question what we saw of him both before he joined Real Madrid and in his debut season at Real Madrid as well.
Something else that feels like a bit of an open question right now, Alex, is that of Rodrygo and what's going on with him. He's only started one of the last 8 games for Real Madrid, again on the bench last night. What's the latest on the situation with him?
It's interesting because, if Real Madrid are playing a front two right now without Mbappe, it could be Vini and Rodrygo as it was under Ancelotti a couple of years ago, but it hasn't been because Gonzalo Garcia has come in and has done exactly what Rodrygo hasn't always done with this team, which is he's been decisive, scoring goals, creating goals, working hard on and off the ball. Rodrygo, his involvement in this tournament so far has really been up and down, hasn't it? Didn't play at all in the second game against Pachuca, came off the bench against Salzburg and didn't do very much. To be honest, there's a natural, talking about this new system for Xabi Alonso, this kind of 3-4-3, there's a natural position for him, which is what Bellingham played last night on the right-hand side of the tree. That's not where Rodrygo wants to play. And I still think this is one that's going to go and might well last all summer because it's not that Rodrygo's desperate to leave Real Madrid. He likes being a Real Madrid player, but he wants to be important. I think the club like having him here. Xabi Alonso likes having him here as an option. But if he's going to be the player that we've seen from him only sporadically over the years, and certainly not the player that we saw at the end of last season. So I think there's still a long way to go in this one. This is a team, this is a system, I think, that could really suit Rodrygo, but he has to be right mentally. He has to buy in a way that we're seeing a lot of the other players doing.
So next up for Real Madrid now when it comes to the knockout rounds, it's Juventus, and they have a lot of history with Juventus, recent history as well. You'll remember that they beat them in the 2017 final. There were those games in the quarters where we saw Buffon getting sent off, Cristiano Ronaldo shining back in the 17-18 season. Before that, though, it was Juventus who were coming through, back through 2002, 2003. In the late 90s, Real Madrid beat Juve in that final, and quarters before that, it was Juventus who did come through. All of these games were in the Champions League. Let's hear what Xabi Alonso has had to say about Real Madrid's next opponents.
Now we are playing last 16 against top Juve. For me, it doesn't matter that today they lost. Juve is Juve, and full respect, and we will need to prepare well for that big game. And we know it's make or break game. Now there is no what's going to happen after is continue, go home. So we need to be ready for that.
Real Madrid against Juventus. Real Madrid big favourites to advance to the quarter-finals here. What do you make of this tie, Ale?
As good as we feel about Real Madrid following their matchup against Salzburg, even if Juventus struggle against Manchester City, it feels like this is a definite step up. Now, it may be a definite step up historically in terms of what Juventus and Real Madrid have been and the rivalry that we just mentioned and the results that they have had in Champions League. Juventus is in a different place right now. And while Real Madrid feels like they're trending, feels like they're projecting in the right direction, Juventus is still sort of kind of figuring out who they are, and they're not quite where they need to be. I think it's going to be complicated for Real Madrid. I think there are going to be some issues, and maybe Juventus is able to expose some of the frailties that I think still exist for Real Madrid defensively and some of the mismatches in terms of number in the midfield. But overall, I think Real Madrid are furthering along right now under Xabi Alonso than Juventus are. I think Juventus are going to be eliminated from this competition, and Real Madrid will continue on. Juventus didn't look all that great against Manchester City.
Yeah, so we just heard what Xabi Alonso had to say. What's been the feeling and the reaction on the ground there? Obviously, Alex, you've been following Real Madrid, and just the reaction in the Spanish press to this matchup.
I think it feels like the right kind of next step for Real Madrid. I think it's pretty much ideal from that point of view because they've had these 3 group games, which have been winnable games against decent teams, but not great teams. And now I think it's time to step things up a bit, to have a more serious opponent, but also at the same time, a beatable opponent. They didn't want to be playing a Manchester City right now, or a PSG, or maybe even a Chelsea. I think a team like Juventus, who are a big team, a big name, as we saw there, a lot of history, but aren't at their best. I think this is the kind of challenge that is right for Xabi Alonso's team right now, to show they keep making progress, to improve again from the Salzburg game, take another step up against more credible opposition, but not a team that is really going to stretch them. So I think in that sense, I think Juventus right now for Real Madrid is the right kind of test. It's what they need.
Well, the latest Football Americas actually talks more about this. In fact, this man is on the latest edition. Stayed up late to watch that Real Madrid game.
Yes, I did.